You know what's wild? The Toronto Blue Jays offseason just went from quiet to absolutely explosive in less than 24 hours. And I need to tell you about this because what John Heyman just reported has completely changed the conversation around this team's pitching plans. We're talking about a legitimate bombshell that has Blue Jays fans losing their minds right now. And honestly, after you hear what I have to say, you might be right there with them. Let me just cut right to it. John Heyman dropped a report yesterday that the Blue Jays are among several teams with serious interest in Framber Valdez. And before you roll your eyes and say this is just another leverage play or agent games, hold on, because this is different. This is legitimately different, and I'm going to explain exactly why. First off, the timing of this report is absolutely bizarre in the best way possible. We're in this dead zone of the offseason where the NBA trade deadline is happening. People are talking about Giannis potentially getting moved, and baseball has kind of taken a back seat. Then, out of nowhere, John Heyman tweets specifically about the Blue Jays and Framber Valdez, not just mentioning them in passing, but specifically calling them out as having interest alongside Joel Sherman's reporting. That alone raised my eyebrows, but it gets so much better. People immediately started replying to Heyman's tweet saying the Blue Jays are just being used as leverage for the Orioles or maybe even the Astros trying to bring Valdez back. You know how this usually goes? Teams get thrown into the mix to drive up the price, create urgency. All that stuff we've seen 1,000 times before. But here's where it gets really interesting. Heyman actually responded to one of these comments. Someone said agents are trying to make the Orioles sweat, and Heyman came back with, unsurprisingly, conspiracy theorist misses the mark. He directly shut down the idea that this is just a leverage play. When was the last time you saw a reporter of Heyman's caliber actually engage with that kind of speculation and shoot it down? That tells you something real is happening here. Now let's talk about why this makes so much sense for Toronto. Framber Valdez is a ground ball machine, and the Blue Jays just happen to have one of the most elite infield defenses in baseball with guys like Ernie Clement and Andres Jimenez. This isn't just throwing names at a wall and hoping something sticks. This is actually strategic roster construction that makes sense. Valdez thrives on contact, he gets guys to hit the ball on the ground, and Toronto can turn those ground balls into outs better than almost anyone. The fit is almost too perfect. But I know what you're thinking. The Blue Jays just spent a ton of money on pitching already. They've got guys like Bieber, they brought in some other arms. Why would they need Valdez? Well, let me walk you through the rotation situation because it's not as secure as you might think. Yusei Kikuchi has a player option after this year, and he's probably opting out. Kevin Gausman becomes a free agent after this season. Tristan Savage hasn't proven he can stay healthy over a full season yet. Same thing with Cody Poteet at the major league level as a full-time starter. You've got Eric Looper and Bowden Francis, but when you really break it down, there's a lot of uncertainty beyond this year and even some question marks for this season. Getting Framber Valdez on what's looking more and more like a short-term deal would be absolutely massive. Early reports from Ben Nicholson-Smith and others suggested Valdez would only be an option if his market came down to what the Blue Jays were willing to pay, and guess what? His market has absolutely plummeted. We're talking about a guy whose spot track projected at 6 years and $200 million. And he's still sitting there unsigned in mid-February. That projection is clearly way off, and the longer he sits, the better it is for teams like Toronto, who are willing to be creative with shorter-term, high-average annual value deals. Think about a 2-year deal with an opt-out after year 1. Maybe something like 2 years, $60 million with an opt-out. Valdez gets paid really well for this season. He's got a chance to rebuild his market value if he has a great year and opts out. And the Blue Jays get a legitimate ace-caliber arm without committing to 5 or 6 years. If the fit works and he opts in after year 1, great, you've got him for another year at a reasonable price. If he opts out, you got 1 year of elite production and you move on. It limits risk on both sides and gives Toronto a legitimate difference maker. Now, I'd be lying if I said there weren't some concerns. The clubhouse stuff with Valdez is real. There was that incident where he threw a fastball at his own catcher. There's been some reported attitude issues, and you have to wonder if bringing him into what's been described as one of the best clubhouses in baseball right now is worth the risk. But here's the thing, if any clubhouse can handle a strong personality, it's probably this one. You've got veteran leaders. You've got guys like Vladimir Guerrero Jr. and Alejandro Kirk, who could help keep him calm and focused. The talent is undeniable. And sometimes you have to take calculated risks to compete for championships. What really sealed the deal for me in terms of this being legitimate was the report from last night that the Astros, Valdez's former team, haven't had any recent conversations about bringing him back. Dana Brown, their GM, said they haven't talked lately about a return. If Houston isn't aggressively pursuing him, and his market has clearly softened, Toronto is in a perfect position to swoop in and get a guy who could be the difference between making the playoffs and winning the division. The other piece that makes this so intriguing is the timing relative to the potential lockout after this season. If there's going to be a work stoppage, getting a short-term deal done now, flexing those financial muscles before everything potentially shuts down, that's smart business. You're not tying up money long-term when there's uncertainty about the next collective bargaining agreement, but you're still adding elite talent when you have a legitimate window to compete. Look, I still think the Orioles are probably the favorites here. They've been connected to Valdez for a while. They need starting pitching desperately, and it would make sense. But the longer this drags on without a resolution, the better it is for Toronto. Every day that passes where Valdez doesn't sign elsewhere is another day the Blue Jays can make their case, structure a creative deal, and potentially land a guy who's been an ace when he's on his game. People are going to underestimate what this would mean if it happens. Adding Framber Valdez to a rotation that already has some solid pieces would immediately make Toronto one of the most dangerous teams in the American League. You'd have multiple guys who can dominate, you'd have depth, and you'd have flexibility. This isn't about desperation. It's about taking advantage of a market inefficiency and getting a premium player at potentially below market value because of how this offseason has played out. So do I think it's going to happen? Honestly, I think it's more realistic than people want to admit. The fact that Heyman specifically called out the Blue Jays and then defended the report against leverage speculation tells me there's real substance here.